Welcome to episode 6 of Chat with the Chair. I'm your host, CFMA's 2022-23 chair, Tom Borgia. For those of you that don't know, September is Suicide Prevention Month. So today I'm sitting down with Dave Sauerman, the managing director at CIBC US and chair of CFMA's Suicide Prevention Committee, and Kristy Domboski, CFMA's director of communications and editor of Building Profits and an at-large director for the Construction Industry Alliance for Suicide Prevention, also known as CIASP. Dave and Kristy, welcome to the chat.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, let's get started with our questions. Kristy, you're up first. What are you excited about work-wise these days?
So there are two things that I'm really excited about that are going on right now in my world at CFMA. The first is a magazine redesign of CFMA Building Profits. So we've done updates over the years, but it hasn't been revamped in at least 20 years, probably more. And this includes a new masthead, and that'll be the fifth masthead, I think, that CFMA has had over the years. So we're looking for that to come out in 23, and hopefully members are going to really enjoy the new look and feel and still the great content that they've come to expect from the magazine. So the other thing that's really exciting right now in the interest, since it's Suicide Prevention Month, is the activity and engagement of our suicide prevention chapter champions. These are representatives from about almost half of CFMA's chapters across the country, and they're really becoming more engaged and working with them to support their efforts at the local level so that we can carry suicide prevention to the chapters, and then their members can take it into their companies and overall impact the industry.
Excellent. Sounds like you got your hands full with a lot of new and exciting things working these days.
Yeah, it is really exciting. So thanks.
Very neat, very neat. Okay, Dave, you're next. How did you get into the construction industry?
That's kind of by accident. You know, my first adult job out of school was working for a bank in Louisville, and I kind of went through the training program and worked in the large corporate kind of general business group. My wife and I had a long weekend in Chicago, and she said, boy, it'd be great if we could live here. And a couple months later, I had accepted a job at Harris Bank to work in their construction and engineering group. You know, at this point, I knew absolutely nothing about the construction industry other than it was very strange and confusing. But the C&E group was sort of the sister group to both the insurance group and the utility group at Harris, both of which I had focused on in my first job. The offer to the C&E group was too good to pass up, and I was sure that as soon as I got there, everyone would recognize their mistake and they would transfer me either to the insurance or the utility group. Bottom line is nobody ever discovered the mistake, and here I am some 37 years later.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I think it's always great to hear about how people got into the industry, especially when you look at construction finance, because there's really not a lot of finance stuff in college. I mean, there is finance stuff in college, but there's not construction specific. So it's always interesting to hear how people got into the industry, and a lot of people similar to you and similar to me. Hey, I fell into it, or hey, an opportunity came up, or hey, I knew somebody else, I had a connection, and here I am 10, 20, 30, 37 years later. So
never would have guessed.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that. That's pretty neat to hear. So now I've got a question for both of you. With it being Suicide Prevention Month, I'm curious, how did you both get involved with suicide prevention? So Kristy, how about you first?
Sure. So in Word, the magazine, Cal Beyer wrote an article with Dr. Sally Spencer Thomas, and it was on suicide prevention, with it being outside of our normal area of focus for the magazine. I talked with Stuart Binstock, CFMA's CEO and president, and we acknowledge that it's beyond the scope of what we usually publish, but the fact that it so directly relates to what our members do, they handle their company's finances. And when you look at it, the biggest impact to a bottom line is your people. We couldn't ignore it. And I'm so glad and grateful for that leadership from both Cal and Stuart supporting this endeavor. We got into it because it's the right thing to do. And it's just become a passion for me. The more I learned about how at risk our industry is and the people who work every day on the jobs and in the offices, it's something that's very important to me to continue to support. So.
Well, thank you for sharing that. For sure, people are our greatest asset, and the ones we need to take care of. So that's inspiring the way that you got in. So thank you for sharing. Dave, how about you? How did you get involved with suicide prevention?
Well, I think like many who I've worked with in suicide prevention, we've all got some sort of personal connection. Not always the case, but oftentimes the case. A friend, a relative, perhaps they've even struggled themselves. I'm no different. About 25 years ago, my son attempted suicide a number of times. My story does have a happy ending, as he's now doing quite well. He's married, 2 kids, and is in the trades as a union boilermaker. However, before getting to that light at the end of the tunnel, my son and family had to go through kind of a decade of trauma. During this time, I really began to learn a lot about mental illness, chronic depression, and suicide. And what struck me was one of the biggest obstacles to getting help from my son was our inability collectively to comfortably and realistically discuss the problem. For some time, I had the same problem myself. I had grown up thinking that you shouldn't be discussing these sort of things, but ultimately determined that until I could realistically discuss the problems, I really couldn't help my son. So normalizing the conversation became my primary goal. Basically, you can't fix a problem if you can't realistically and comfortably address it. And to me, the first step in this process is to understand that mental health is really a subset of physical health, much like digestive health or heart health or something else. I've always been active in CFMA, and when in 2015, we took the first steps towards really addressing suicide in our industry, I knew that I needed to get involved at some level. So just started creeping in little by little, and here we are 7 years later, and I'm chairing the committee.
Great. Well, appreciate your candid response and your service to CFMA and the Suicide Prevention Committee. So thank you for sharing that. We'll go a little bit lighter. Kristy, what do you do to unwind from work?
I garden. We live in the woods, so it's a little bit difficult. The deer are my biggest challenge right now, but yeah, I do love my vegetable garden. I can't keep plants alive so well indoors, but outside, that's my happy place, digging in the dirt and feeding my chickens my little tomatoes. And yeah, it's really enjoyable for me, and to just show my kids you can grow your own food and help them learn a little bit more about plants and nature, and just to have some quiet time out there.
For sure. How do you keep the deer away? What's the best approach?
Right now, lawn furniture, because we don't have a fence. But yeah, we have a garden, a couple gardens that are fenced in, and they're pretty good at staying away from that. But if it's within their reach, it's fair game. So the deer and sometimes the chipmunks and squirrels, but have to give back to the Mother Nature too. So I'll share a little bit.
Gotcha. Totally understand. And for those fans listening out there, New Jersey is the garden state. For those of you that don't know, fun fact, New Jersey is the garden state. So Way to keep up with that, Kristy, as well.
You got it.
All right, Dave.
Very good.
What do you want to be remembered for?
A funny question, because my answer would have changed depending on when you asked me throughout my life. As a kid, I would say that the answer clearly would have been, I want to be remembered as the greatest hockey player of all time. But somewhere along the way, I realized that there were a lot of players that were bigger, faster, and far more skilled than I. And those dreams kind of went by the wayside. I'd say in my 20s and 30s, I would want to be remembered as a titan of industry. But then I discovered I wasn't always the smartest or the hardest working person in the room. Now at the ripe old age of 63, I guess I want to be remembered by coworkers, colleagues, and friends as somebody who consistently tried to do the right thing, whether that be in their personal or professional life. Gotten kind of simple.
I like that. It's interesting. I think when we all have a little bit of time to think about our careers and how we've changed, I think I can relate to that as well, based on where I was a little bit earlier in my career and then maybe mid-career, and how things change, priorities change. And I think we also gained some maturity and some perspective along the way. And some things that should be so simple end up being so hard sometimes. So it's nice to see you come back around to a pretty simple goal for what you want to be remembered for. So great answer on that.
Thanks.
Okay, it is time for you both to ask me anything, any question, nothing, anything you want to know from me. Please, by all means, feel free to ask. So why don't
Kristy, you go first.
Yes, why don't we start with Kristy? Throw it out there, and I'll do my best.
Okay, well, in the spirit of Suicide Prevention Month and supporting mental health, what suggestions do you have for maintaining your positive mental health?
Really good question. It's interesting for me, and I guess I'll back up a second. So when you start thinking about mental health, and I know Dave touched on this a couple minutes ago, it's such a wide-ranging thought, right? So with suicide prevention and just in general health, those are things that I really didn't know as much about maybe 10 years ago. And I think through my involvement with CFMA and CIASP and just understanding really what we're trying to do, it's helped educate me along the way. And obviously it's great for us to share this information out within CFMA members and within industry. But for me personally, I've taken a lot of it and tried to kind of look inside and say, okay, well, hey, how can I also help myself, not only being able to help others, but as far as mental health goes, I mean, I would tell you, I think I could probably be a lot better at it than I am. But I do think that I do a pretty good job of being able to kind of get away from work and get away from the stressors, and whether that's exercise, going for a walk, staying off my phone, not following every single email that happens to come across, regardless of day or night. Just little things, right? It's not rocket science type stuff, but it's just little things that you do throughout your day to promote that mental health, right? It could be walking my dog around the block twice and talking to my dog, although my dog won't talk back to me. I can have the conversation with my dog and clear my mind for a little bit. So for me, it's really exercise. It's being able to spend time with my family and really finding a way to disconnect from work. I think those are probably three of the most important to me. And like we said a minute ago, I think over the course of my career, I've matured as well to be able to understand mental health is so important, and work's important, and family's important, and faith is important. There's a lot of things that are important in all of our lives, but you've got to take the time to kind of compartmentalize and find a way to get outside of your box, take a deep breath, work on your health, work on your fitness, work on how you eat. All those other things, they play a big part in mental health. So I've made some strides, but I've certainly still got a long way to go. But great question. Okay, Dave, what is it you would like to know?
Always wanted to know, Tom, who does your hair, and how did you land on such an incredibly good looking style?
Really good question. It takes one to know one, for sure. So I can appreciate the question for sure. And I am clean shaven today. For all of those out there, I made sure that I shaved up so I looked good for our chat with the chair. But I will share this with you. So I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years ago, when I first started losing my hair and I realized, hey, I'm not going to have this full blown head of hair anymore, which I did have at one point in time, believe it or not. I started realizing there was a local barber club where I lived in Atlanta. And you could go there and they would shave your face and shave your head, and they had beer and wine. And so that was my perfect Friday night wind down. Was I'd finish work, I would go to this barber club, I'd sit down and have a glass of wine, and lay back and have a clean shave for the weekend and would feel great about it. And so I joined. I was a member for probably 3 months or so. And then I realized, okay, hey, it would only cost me a little bit more to be able to go in there twice a week versus once a week. So of course I jumped in. I said, all right, well, I don't have to shave myself. This is wonderful. Jumped in, and then twice a week I'm sitting in the chair and I'm having a glass of wine and they're shaving me up. And I did that for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half. Really enjoyed it. And then started to realize how much I was actually paying for the barber club membership. And as a true CFO financial brain, I couldn't reconcile the fact that I was paying that much to have somebody do something that I could actually do myself. So I dropped the barber club and I said, all right, hey, I'm going to start doing this myself. So I straight blade every other day at home. So that the simple answer to your question is now I do it. I used to be very spoiled and have somebody else do it. But now it's all me. And believe it or not, the money that you would think that I save on shampoo, conditioner, and hair product all gets spent on Gillette razors and aftershave. So I'm probably still losing money on the deal altogether, but I have a good looking head of hair.
Can I have a follow-up question?
For sure, for sure.
When you first discovered that you were losing your hair, did you go straight to the smooth look, or did you attempt to comb over for a while?
You know, at the time, I don't know that I had enough to comb over, because I had always, I guess, going back maybe to high school and college, I actually had a long head of hair. It came out the back of my hat and the whole bit. And I think after college, once I got into more of a professional setting, I went with a neater, tighter cut. So I almost had kind of a semi box cut for a number of years. So as my hair started to go, I started coming down with the clipper, and I'd go from 2 to 1.5 to 1. So I was doing it at 1 for a while. My wife's like, well, you say you're using the 1, but there's no hair coming off anymore. So you're really not a 1 anymore. And so at that point, she's like, well, hey, you should just take a summer and shave it clean. You've got a pretty good looking head. And supposedly you've got to have the right shaped head in order to go bald. And so my wife convinced me. She's like, do it for a summer. You can get a tan on top. Tell me what you think. And if you don't like it after the summer, we can come back and we'll let you grow the little stubble back and you can figure it out. So I don't know that I ever had enough to actually comb it over. And I was actually pretty quick moving to the bald guy. But my wife, as always, you need a partner in crime, and she was able to help me out, get to that spot. And I'm probably 15 years bald at this point. So great question.
Very good.
All right. Well, Dave and Kristy, thank you both for joining me today. For those of you that like to learn more about suicide prevention, please go to cfma.org/suicide prevention. Here you'll find resources from CFMA as well as CIASP. And to our viewers at home, thanks for watching, and be sure to join me next month as I sit down to get to know more people from within CFMA that makes it the amazing organization that it is. Kristy and Dave, thank you for your time and appreciate your efforts in volunteering for CFMA.
Thank you.
Thanks for everything you do. Thanks,
Take
Tom.
care.